Sign here.
Hello, everyone.
Khalil
Did I
Adeyemi
miss anything?
slid the divorce papers across the walnut conference table, as if he were approving an invoice, not ending 11 years of marriage. Behind him, the Santon skyline glowed through the floor-to-ceiling glass. Rain streaked the windows in thin silver lines. Everything in the office looked expensive, controlled, untouchable. Across from him, Zara Okonkwo sat very still. Her wedding ring was still on her finger. Khalil noticed it and gave a small, cruel smile. "Still wearing it," he said. "I didn't realize denial came in diamonds." The lawyer at the end of the table lowered his eyes. Zara lifted her gaze slowly. Her face was calm, but there was a kind of tiredness in her eyes that only betrayal creates. Not loud pain, not dramatic pain. The quiet kind. The kind that has already cried in private and has nothing left to prove in public. Khalil leaned back in his chair with the confidence of a man who had spent too many years being admired and had mistaken admiration for character. "You know," he said casually, "most women at least pretend to fight for the marriage. They beg, they shout, they throw something expensive. You're making this feel disappointingly easy." Zara's voice was soft when it came. "It stopped being a marriage when loyalty became optional for you." Something sharp passed through Khalil's expression, but it vanished quickly. Men like him were experts at recovering their ego before anyone else noticed it had been touched. He gave a dry laugh and reached for his glass. "There she is," he said. "That tone, that righteous little tone. You always loved sounding wiser than everyone in the room." "No," Zara replied. "I just got tired of being the only adult in it." The lawyer adjusted his tie. Khalil smiled again, but this one was thinner. "You should be careful, Zara. Pride is expensive when you have nothing to fall back on." She said nothing. That irritated him more than anger would have. He had already moved in with Amale Dube, the younger woman everyone in their circle now described as effortless, glamorous, refreshing. Refreshing was always such an interesting word when used by people defending betrayal. It meant younger. It meant easier. It meant less likely to ask questions. Khalil lifted the file and tapped it once. "Let's not make this ugly," he said. "You know I'm being generous." Zara looked down at the pages. Assets, property, accounts, terms. What cold words. 11 years reduced to legal language. Not the nights she sat beside him while he built his logistics empire. Not the dinners she ate alone while he called it ambition. Not the ideas she offered that he repeated later in boardrooms as if they had been his. Not the ways she made herself smaller and smaller, hoping one day he would stop mistaking her softness for weakness. He mistook her silence again. "I think the real problem," Khalil said, "is that you don't know who you are outside my life." Zara looked at him for a long moment. Then she asked quietly, "Do you really believe I have nothing without you?" He spread one hand with a smirk. "Tell me I'm wrong." She almost did. Almost. But then something inside her became very clear. A man who has benefited from underestimating you for years will not suddenly recognize your worth because of one perfect sentence. So Zara reached for the pen. Khalil watched her closely. He was expecting trembling hands, tears, hesitation, some visible proof that he still had the power to damage her. Instead, she signed the first page, then the second, then the last. smoothly, calmly, elegantly, like a woman setting down something heavy she had carried for too long. Khalil frowned. "That's it?" Zara closed the file and slid it back toward him. "You got your goodbye long before today," she said. "You just didn't notice." She stood, removed her ring, and placed it gently on top of the papers. For the first time that afternoon, he looked uncertain. "You'll regret walking away from this life," he said. Zara picked up her handbag. At the door, she stopped without turning around. "You still think this is the moment my life ends," she said softly. Khalil forced a laugh. "Because it is." A pause. Then her answer came, quiet enough to sound almost kind. "No, Khalil. This is just the moment your importance in my story ends." And then she walked out. Not shattered, not saved. Just done. 4 years later, Zara Okonkwo stood barefoot in the kitchen of her penthouse overlooking Johannesburg, reading a project brief while the espresso machine hummed beside her. Morning sunlight spilled over white stone counters and brushed against the glass walls behind her. The city looked smaller from up there. Not because Johannesburg had changed, because she had. Her assistant, Lerato Maseko, stepped into the kitchen holding a tablet, a leather folder, and one cream-colored envelope with gold-embossed edges. "You have Lagos at 11, Nairobi at 1, and the Addis call." Lerato stopped. "Oh." Zara didn't look up immediately. "What is it?" Lerato placed the envelope on the counter with 2 fingers, like it might stain the marble. Zara's hand stilled halfway to her coffee. She recognized the handwriting instantly. Khalil. Some names do not lose their shape in your memory, no matter how much distance you build. Lerato crossed her arms. "Do you want me to throw it away?" Zara stared at the envelope for a moment before opening it. Inside was a wedding invitation. "Mr. Khalil Adeyemi and Miss Amale Dube request the honor of your presence." Lerato muttered something under her breath that would have made an elder faint. But Zara kept reading. Then she turned the card over. One handwritten line in black ink. "I thought you should finally see what winning looks like." Lerato's jaw dropped. "That man is diseased." Zara said nothing. Not because she was hurt, because she was thinking. 4 years ago, that sentence would have kept her awake. Now it only made her curious. Lerato watched her carefully. "You're not seriously considering this." Zara picked up her coffee and walked toward the windows. Down below, the city moved in confident little patterns. Meetings, traffic, ambition, hunger, survival. 4 years ago, she had left Khalil with 2 suitcases, no public drama, and a silence he misread as failure. What he never understood was that silence became her freedom. He had assumed she vanished because she stopped explaining herself. In reality, she had been rebuilding. Not loudly, not for applause. Deliberately. While he was busy performing success, Zara studied finance at night, consulted discreetly for development firms, turned one overlooked land acquisition into 3 profitable holdings, then built Okonkwo Urban Capital, a private infrastructure and real estate group that now held projects in South Africa, Kenya, Ghana, and Rwanda. She had been profiled in Forbes Africa. She had closed rooms full of men who once looked through her when she entered. She had become the kind of woman whose schedule was protected by people more powerful than Khalil had ever imagined meeting. Lerato lowered her voice. He invited you to compare your life to his. Zara turned and looked at her. And what exactly do you think he'll see when he compares? Lerato opened her mouth, then smiled. Because honestly, Khalil Adeyemi had no idea who his ex-wife had become. Zara looked at the date. Saturday. Next week. Clear my evening, she said. Lerato blinked. You're going? Zara set down her cup. No, she said. I'm returning a message. Then she picked up her phone and dialed. The line connected immediately. Musa, her head of security answered in his usual calm voice. Yes, ma'am. Keep next Saturday night open. A short pause. Personal or professional? Zara glanced at the gold lettering again. Both. Musa was silent for half a second, then gave a faint laugh. That expression is back, isn't it? You know me too well. I know that face means somebody is about to understand consequences. Zara smiled faintly. Not consequences, she said. Perspective. That evening, across the city, Khalil sat in a private lounge with 2 groomsmen and a glass of whiskey. He looked relaxed. Men often look most relaxed right before reality embarrasses them. She'll come, he said confidently. One of the men frowned. Your ex-wife? Khalil smirked. Of course she'll come. How are you so sure? He shrugged. Because people like Zara never really move on. They just learn how to hide disappointment better. Amahle arrived a few minutes later in a white silk dress, bright smile, polished perfection. She slid beside him and looked at the invitation list. You actually invited her? Khalil kissed her cheek. I wanted her to see what life looks like when it chooses correctly. Amahle laughed softly, but one of his friends looked uncomfortable. That feels unnecessary. Khalil swirled the whiskey slowly. No, he said. What's unnecessary is pretending broken people disappear just because they become inconvenient to remember. He said it casually, like cruelty was intelligence, like arrogance was charm, like history could be rewritten simply because he was the one telling it. The wedding estate in Muldersdrift looked like money trying very hard to be seen. White orchids lined the stone pathway. Crystal chandeliers hung from transparent tents. A live string ensemble performed near the lawn while waiters floated past with champagne balanced on silver trays. Every detail had been chosen to make people say one thing: beautiful. And one thing quietly underneath that: expensive. Khalil stood near the entrance, greeting guests with smooth confidence, one hand in his pocket, the other touching shoulders, accepting praise, approving compliments, performing perfection. Amahle glowed beside him. You two are stunning. Couple of the year. This wedding is unreal. Khalil smiled like a man who believed applause was proof of goodness. Then the first black SUV rolled through the gates. At first, nobody paid much attention. Wealthy guests had arrived in luxury vehicles all evening. But then a second SUV entered. Then a third. All black, all identical, all moving with slow, deliberate precision. Conversations began to thin. The quartet kept playing, but attention had shifted. The vehicles stopped near the entrance in a clean line. 4 security professionals exited first. Dark suits, earpieces, controlled posture. Not flashy bodyguards. Real security. the kind attached to people whose names open doors in more than one country. A murmur spread through the lawn. Khalil's smile faded. Amahle frowned. "Who is that?" Nobody answered, because the rear door of the middle SUV had just opened. Zara Okonkwo stepped out into the evening light, and the entire atmosphere changed. She wore a liquid bronze gown that moved like light over dark water. No loud theatrics, no revenge costume. Just elegance so controlled it made everyone else seem over-designed. Her jewelry was minimal, her posture effortless, her expression unreadable. She looked like a woman who had been in far more important rooms than this. Musa stepped out behind her, calm and observant, while the rest of the team took subtle positions around the perimeter. One guest whispered, "Who is she?" Another answered a second later, "Oh my God, that's Khalil's ex-wife." "No way. That is his ex-wife." Khalil felt something tight and cold settle in his stomach. This was not the woman he remembered. The Zara in his memory had looked tired, careful, hurt in the way women look when they are still protecting the man who broke them. This woman looked like ownership, of space, of self, of consequence. Amahle stared at him. "You said she was struggling." Khalil swallowed. She was. Amahle looked back at the convoy. Struggling women do not arrive like heads of state. Meanwhile, Zara moved through the entrance garden with a calm that bent the room around her. Guests shifted instinctively to make space. She did not search for Khalil, did not scan the crowd, did not perform discomfort. That was what unsettled him most. She wasn't acting brave. She was simply unbothered. A server offered her champagne. "Sparkling water, thank you," she said. Within minutes, phones appeared beneath linen-covered tables. People were searching her name. Expressions changed quickly. Wait, she owns Okonkwo Urban Capital? That's the group behind the Kigali Logistics Corridor. She was on the Africa Investment Summit panel last month. Good Lord, she's worth how much? I know her. Our firm has been trying to get a meeting with her for 6 months. Each whispered sentence landed inside Khalil like a private humiliation. Because for years he had told everyone Zara was too emotional, too dependent, too ordinary to thrive alone. And now half his wedding guests were discovering she had become the most impressive person in attendance. His mother saw her near the reflecting pool first. Mrs. Adeyemi had always possessed the dangerous gift of observation. She walked toward Zara slowly and stopped in front of her. For a moment, both women simply looked at each other. "Zara," Adenike said softly. Zara smiled politely. "Mrs. Adeyemi?" Adenike's eyes moved over the gown, the posture, the security detail, the complete absence of chaos. "You look..." She paused. There were many words available. Successful, elegant, untouchable. But she chose the truest one. Powerful. Zara's smile deepened slightly. "I am." Adenike glanced across the lawn toward her son. "He told people the divorce ruined you." Zara took a slow sip of water. "People usually believe the version of events that protects the loudest ego." Adenike exhaled. "He underestimated you." Zara shook her head gently. "No, he simply never saw me clearly." That sentence stayed with the older woman long after Zara walked away. Across the lawn, Amahle's discomfort was growing by the minute. Guests were still congratulating her, but more and more of them were glancing over her shoulder toward Zara. A well-known banker had just left the bride mid-sentence to introduce himself to Khalil's ex-wife. Amahle turned sharply. "Why is everyone obsessed with her?" Khalil forced a laugh. "She likes attention." But even he heard how weak that sounded. Because Zara wasn't chasing attention. Attention was chasing her. And everyone could feel the difference. The ceremony had not even started, and already Khalil felt control slipping through his fingers. Everywhere he turned, people were whispering. Not about the flowers, not about the dress, not about the wedding. About Zara. She built a R1 billion portfolio in under 4 years. I heard she's expanding into West Africa. That security team is real, by the way. She's even more striking in person. Amahle grabbed Khalil's arm tightly. "Go talk to her." He frowned. "What?" "Go remind people she's your ex-wife, not the reason they came here." Khalil looked across the lawn again. Zara was speaking with 2 investors near the reflecting pool, one hand resting lightly on the stem of her glass. She looked comfortable, not triumphant, not vindictive, just anchored. And suddenly he needed answers. So he made the mistake that ruined the rest of his night. He walked toward her. People noticed immediately. Conversations softened. Eyes followed him across the lawn. Musa noticed too. He straightened almost imperceptibly, but Zara gave no sign of concern. When Khalil stopped in front of her, she looked up calmly. "Khalil?" His name sounded very small in her mouth. Zara. Her expression didn't change. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them no longer felt intimate. It felt educational.
"You look different," he said finally.
Zara tilted her head.
"People usually do after 4 years."
"That's not what I meant."
"I know."
A server approached with a tray. Khalil took a whiskey without thinking. Zara's eyes dropped briefly to the glass. "You'll need something stronger later," she said. For the first time, one of the investors near them almost laughed. Khalil stared. "You joke now." "I breathe now too," Zara replied. "Life is full of surprising developments." The investors politely excused themselves, sensing they were standing too close to a reckoning. When they were alone, Khalil lowered his voice. "I didn't expect you to come." "I know." "Then why did you?" That question sat between them for a moment. Zara looked out across the wedding lawn. The orchids, the lights, the performance of perfection. Then she answered, "I wanted to know whether the pain was still there." Khalil's chest tightened. She looked back at him. "It isn't." There are some sentences a man never forgets hearing. That was one of them. He swallowed and tried to recover his balance. "You make it sound easy." A flicker of honesty crossed her face. "It wasn't." He said nothing. "There were months," she continued quietly, "when I barely recognized myself. Nights when I questioned everything. My judgment, my worth, my future." For the first time all evening, he glimpsed something human and old between them. Then she continued, "But eventually, I realized something important." He waited. "You spent years convincing me I was small because it made you feel larger." His jaw tightened. "That's unfair,"
Zara actually smiled at that. No, Khalil. Unfair was being introduced as decoration at events where I had built half the ideas. Unfair was being mocked for ambition in private and quoted in public. Unfair was needing kindness and receiving criticism because criticism made you feel in charge. He looked away, and she noticed that too. You invited me here to compare my life to yours, she said. He exhaled slowly. Maybe. And now? He didn't answer immediately because for the first time that evening, he wasn't sure which one of them had actually won anything. He studied her properly. The calm, the confidence, the absence of hunger in her eyes. Suddenly, he remembered the woman she had been before marriage made her tired. Sharp, curious, bold, imaginative. Had he destroyed that version of her? Or had he simply benefited from her forgetting it for a while? You changed, he said quietly. Zara's expression softened almost invisibly. No, she said. I returned to who I was before loving someone who needed me smaller.
That landed harder than anger ever could. Because anger still leaves room for relevance. This felt colder. This felt like closure. Across the lawn, Amale was watching the conversation with rising panic. They've been talking too long, she snapped to her maid of honor. But it wasn't the length of the conversation that frightened her. It was Khalil's face. He no longer looked like a groom. He looked like a man discovering that his version of the past had expired. At that exact moment, another guest approached Khalil from the side. It was Banele Mokwena, head of one of the most respected development banks in the region. Sorry to interrupt, Banele said, nodding respectfully to Zara. Ms. Okonkwo? Zara smiled. Mr. Mokwena. Banele turned to Khalil. I had no idea you were once married to Zara. Khalil forced a smile. Long time ago. Banele gave a low whistle and looked back at Zara. Well, he said, that may be the most expensive thing you ever lost. Khalil's fingers tightened around the whiskey glass. Banele continued, oblivious, or perhaps not. Our board approved the Eastport expansion this morning. Zara's consortium is leading it. Khalil blinked. What? Banele frowned slightly. I assumed you knew. Your group was one of the firms that submitted an early proposal last year. Zara's face did not change. She had not come to announce this, which somehow made it worse. Khalil looked at her sharply. You're taking the Eastport project? She met his gaze evenly. We won it. There was no boast in her tone, no petty pleasure, just fact. Banele excused himself after a few more polite words, leaving Khalil standing in stunned silence. That project was the one he had once called his inevitable empire move. The one he had bragged about securing. The one he had told people would make him untouchable. And now, the woman he had invited to witness his victory had quietly won the contract he could not. Zara watched the realization settle over him. For the first time in years, Khalil looked stripped of language. You did this on purpose, he said at last. No, Zara answered. I did my work. The ceremony coordinator announced that guests should begin moving toward the seating area. Music shifted. Lights warmed. But the emotional center of the wedding had already moved, and everyone knew it. Khalil looked at her with something close to desperation. Are you happy? The question surprised even him. Zara studied his face for a moment, then smiled. Not politely, not strategically, genuinely. Yes. No hesitation, no performance, just truth. He felt that answer in the deepest part of his ego, the place where men like Khalil store the assumption that women they diminish remain diminished forever. But Zara stood in front of him, more alive than she had ever looked beside him. She set down her empty glass.
I should go soon, she said. I have an early flight.
To where?
Accra.
The answer came so casually that it embarrassed him. Different world, different altitude, different life. As the first guests began moving toward the aisle, Khalil found himself speaking before he could stop. When did you stop loving me? The question hung there, rawer than he intended. For the first time that evening, sadness touched Zara's face. Not sadness for herself, for him. Because she understood something he still did not. I didn't stop all at once, she said softly. The music from the ceremony floated across the lawn behind them. It happened slowly. Khalil lowered his eyes. Zara looked toward the lights, then back at him. Every time you made me feel foolish for wanting more. A pause. Every time you embarrassed me in front of people and called it a joke. Another pause. Every time I needed tenderness and received correction instead. He said nothing, because there was nothing left to defend. Love rarely dies in one dramatic moment, Khalil, she said. It dies in small disappointments that never heal properly. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Then Zara gave him one final smile. Not bitter, not angry. Free. I hope you become a kinder husband this time. Musa stepped forward from a respectful distance, not intruding, simply present. The kind of loyalty that cannot be rented cheaply. Khalil noticed that too. You're leaving before the ceremony. I've seen enough. What did you come here for, really? Zara looked at him carefully. For certainty. And? She glanced once toward the aisle where guests were taking their seats, where Amale stood pretending not to watch, where chandeliers glowed over a celebration that suddenly felt too polished to be sincere. Then Zara answered. You wanted me to witness what you called winning. A small silence passed. But peace is the only victory that lasts. With that, she turned and walked toward the waiting SUVs. No dramatic exit. No final performance. No need. A few guests watched from a distance. Others pretended not to. Khalil followed her part way, stopping near the entrance as Musa opened the car door. Zara. She turned one last time. He searched her face for some trace of the woman who once needed him. He found none. Only grace. Only completion. Only the unbearable calm of a person who has healed beyond your reach. She stepped into the vehicle. The door closed softly. The convoy pulled away. And for the first time in his adult life, Khalil Adeyemi stood surrounded by wealth and felt poor. The wedding went ahead. The vows were spoken. The guests clapped. Photographers captured perfect angles of perfect smiles under perfect light. From the outside, everything looked successful. But success has a sound when it is hollow. That night, Khalil heard it in every toast. In every laugh that landed a little too late. In every compliment that felt disconnected from his chest. Amahle noticed it too. After the final guests left, she found him alone near the reception tent, staring at an empty glass. You're still thinking about her, she said. Khalil rubbed his forehead. No. Amahle gave a short, humorless laugh. That's the first honest thing you've lied about tonight. He looked at her sharply, but she was already tired. No woman scares another woman just by existing unless there's unfinished truth somewhere, Amahle said quietly. And tonight, you looked less like a man getting married and more like a man meeting his consequences. She walked away before he could answer. Later, long after the music ended and the flowers had started to wilt in the heat of the tent lights, Khalil sat alone at a table covered with half-finished drinks. He thought about all the times Zara spoke and he interrupted. All the ideas he dismissed. All the times she made herself easier to hold, easier to control, easier to overlook. He had not lost her on the day she signed the papers. He lost her slowly. Every time he chose ego over kindness. Every time he preferred admiration to intimacy. Every time he mistook her love for dependence. Across the city, Zara stood barefoot beside the glass wall of her penthouse, Johannesburg glittering below like scattered gold. Her phone buzzed with tomorrow's schedule. Accra, then Nairobi, then a call with investors in London. A life waiting for her. A life she built herself. Musa stepped quietly into the room. Was it worth going? Zara looked out at the skyline for a long moment before answering. Yes. For closure? She smiled faintly. No. Musa waited. Zara lifted her glass and watched the city lights reflect against it. He wanted me to see what winning looked like, she said softly. A small silence followed. Then her smile deepened, calm and private. I think I showed him first. Far away, in another part of the city, Khalil Adeyemi sat inside everything he once believed would prove he had succeeded, only to discover that power without peace feels like punishment in a tailored suit. Because the most devastating answer to someone who expects your pain is your healing.